Today we're going to be sewing my latest pattern, which is a Stella scrub cap. A lot of you guys really enjoyed my first scrub cap pattern release, so I'm so excited to be sharing the second pattern with you. The first pattern was a Euro style scrub cap, and this one is a ponytail style scrub cap for medium to long hair. To make this pattern, you'll need 28 inches of single fold bias tape. You'll also need 6 inches of 1/4 inch elastic, and then to cut out your pattern, you'll just need some paper scissors and some tape. I have a step-by-step video tutorial showing you how to print patterns at home and also how to assemble them. But this pattern is pretty straightforward. You'll just need to print out your pattern at 100% scale, and then you just want to tape those pieces side by side, matching the shapes, and then just cut out your pattern pieces as so. The great thing about my patterns, especially if you're an absolute beginner, is I like to mark which area of the pattern is corresponding to the body. So on my pattern, you can see the marking for where the forehead is. I also indicate on the pattern which area needs to be gathered and also the bias tape curved edge. So again, if you're an absolute beginner with sewing, you will have no problem at all with following along with my sewing pattern. Make sure to transfer all of those little notch markings as well. Those are going to match up later on in the sewing process. Now we're going to prepare all of our fabric so that we can sew. I just want you to grab your bias tape and you're going to open out one of those raw edges, and you're going to line that raw edge with the right side of the bias tape matching the right side of the fabric, and you're just going to pin or clip it along that curved edge just as you see me doing here. This bias tape is going to create the casing for our elastic in a later step. You just want to keep clipping that all the way along. And then once we sew, we're going to sew along the crease line that is closest to the raw edge. Bias tape stretches along nicely around those curved edges. That's the reason that we're using this instead of just folding over that fabric to create a casing. You'll find that if you try to just fold over that fabric to create the casing for your elastic, all of the edges are going to bunch up and it's not going to fold over very neatly. Again, the bias tape is going to curve along those edges really nicely with the fabric. Now we're going to pin pattern piece number 2 to pattern piece number 1 with the right sides facing and matching those notches. Clip those pieces together, matching the notches, and then you just want to evenly clip throughout, easing in that fabric as needed. Now we're going to work on our ties. I like to use an iron just to help me with the crease line here. It makes this process a lot easier. You just want to fold your fabric with the wrong sides facing, just like you see me doing here, to create a crease along the length of the ties. And then you're going to fold the fabric onto itself, again with the wrong sides facing, just to meet that crease line. And then you're going to fold those edges again to meet each other. This is going to create our ties. Repeat those same exact steps to your remaining tie, and then if you need any help with any of the steps in this video, remember you can always pause and rewind, or you can leave me a comment and I'll be happy to clarify any of the steps that you need help with. Now that we have our fabric prepared, we can finally get to the fun part, which is sewing. So take your fabric to your sewing machine, and we're first going to sew that bias tape in place. So you just want to sew along that clipped edge, removing those clips as you go, and you're sewing along that crease line that is closest to the raw edge of the fabric. So just sew within that crease line all the way along. Always remember to back stitch at the beginning and the end of your seams. A back stitch is basically just reversing over your stitches to lock that seam in place. Once you finish sewing, you can trim that seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. You could use pinking shears or just your rotary cutter or fabric scissors. This step is optional, but it just helps to remove some of that bulk. As you're cutting, just make sure not to cut through your stitches. Now we're going to fold that bias tape over to the wrong side of the fabric. We're just going to sew very close to that folded edge. This is going to create our casing for our elastic. Before we insert our elastic into our casing, we're going to create our gathers along the top edge of the fabric. To create our gathers, we're going to first start at one of those notches and we're going to end at the notch on the other side of the fabric. You're going to start at one of those notches and you're going to sew a basting stitch, leaving some extra thread on both ends of the notches so that we can slightly pull those to gather our fabric. Once we've created our gathers, we can go ahead and insert our elastic. You just want to use that bodkin to clip one end of the elastic, and then you're going to insert that into the casing. Before all of that elastic goes into the casing, you want to sew that in place. So go ahead and leave just about 1/2 inch elastic extended from that casing, and you're just going to zigzag stitch that in place. Then you can just continue threading your elastic through your casing, and then just go ahead and zigzag that opposite end in place as well. You can trim off that extra elastic and those thread pieces, and then as you can see, this creates that ponytail holder. It doesn't look like much now, but we're going to use it in a later step. Now we're going to move on to our ties. These are very easy. You just want to sew along the entire length of those ties. Just go ahead and repeat that to the other tie as well. Now we're going to sew our main head pieces together. So I just like to start at one end, and then I like to sew to the center of the headpiece, which was at that notch marking. So I like to sew from one end to the notch, and then I flip my fabric over and sew from that end to the notch. This is just going to help distribute the fabric evenly. If you start from one end and sew to the other, the fabric has a tendency to pull along those curved edges, and then it kind of looks a little bit distorted. If you sew from one end to the center and the other end to the center, everything tends to look a little bit smoother and a lot neater at the end. Now you can just finish that seam with a serger or your desired method. And then you just want to finger press that seam towards the forehead area of the main fabric piece. I like to just move my little compartment out of the way to make this step a little bit easier. So working from the right side of the fabric, I'm just kind of pulling that seam line open and I'm top stitching that seam in place about 1/4 inch away from that seam line. I'm going to use a serger to finish that raw edge of the forehead area, and then I'm just going to fold that in about 1 inch. And then I'm just going to sew very close to that serged edge. This is creating that hem along the forehead area of the scrub cap. Now that we have our main piece done, it's time to attach our ponytail holder to the back neck of the scrub cap. So you just want to grab that ponytail holder and you're going to pin that right sides together to the back neck area of the main pattern piece. And you just want to evenly distribute those gathers throughout the seam line. Just go ahead and clip that in place, just like you see me doing here. Now you want to sew along that clipped edge with 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end of your seam. Very last step is to attach our ties. So I like to just make a knot at one end of each of the ties, and then I just clip off that extra fabric. And then I use the raw edge that does not have a knot on it, and I'm going to pin that with the right sides facing to the seam line of the back neck and that ponytail holder area. So just align the raw edges of the tie to that seam line, and then you're just going to sew that in place with a zigzag stitch. And then I like to fold that out, and I'm just going to top stitch very close to that edge, just further securing that tie in place. Repeat those same exact steps to the other side of the scrub cap using your other tie. To wear your ponytail holder scrub cap, you just wrap it around your ponytail and then you use those ties to secure your pony in place. I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you have so much fun making these for your friends and your family. Thank you so much for watching. If you really enjoy sewing scrub caps, make sure to check out my other scrub cap pattern as well. Again, thank you so much for watching. You can get this pattern on my website at rosypeñapattern.com. The link will be in the description bar of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to grab your pattern, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!